Enda Gallery, you're very welcome to the podcast. I need to ask you a question. I heard you on national radio and you talked about being in an ashram or a monastery or a retreat or something and coming out with this song that you had in a vision. I think it was The Greatest Gift. Is that right? I'd love to know more about that.
So I decided to go to an ashram in Morocco at the start of 2019. And so I did the 10-day Vipassana meditation, which is just 10 days complete silence and 10 hours a day meditation, no reading or writing, no phones. It's a really big trip for the mind, really an incredible experience. And by the fourth day, I had the only conscious dream that I've ever had, which essentially I was dreaming, but totally awake within the dream, which has never happened to me before since. And it kind of picked me out of the bed in the ashram and kind of flew me through the sky. And I had to keep kind of grounding myself that this was a dream. And flew me through the sky and into this big cathedral. And I had actually written this song about 8 months before, but I'd kind of forgotten about it. I think I even showed it to somebody, and they hadn't really liked it because it was just a really rough demo. And I'd kind of gotten a bit discouraged, and I kind of left it, and I hadn't thought about it anymore. And then I was flown into this cathedral, and I could hear this song playing, and it was being sung by a gospel choir, and there was a female vocalist singing it, and it just sounded unbelievable. Like, I really had the feeling of ecstasy in my whole body, just listening to how it was supposed to be produced, basically. And I was just like, wow, feels amazing, it sounds amazing, feels amazing. And then, and then when I woke up, I was like, okay, I can't write that down because you're not allowed to read or write in there. But like, I was like, okay, well, I'm definitely never going to forget that anyway. And so when I came out of the ashram about a week and a half later, I kind of just set to work on following the dream and finding that person who turned out to be Tola McKay, and finding that choir, which was the African Gospel Choir Dublin. And I spent probably the next 6 or 8 months making that song.
Wow, there's so much in that, isn't there? Like, we could just spend the next hour talking about that one thing. So I want to hone in on the fact that you presented the demo to somebody and that their feedback almost could have potentially buried it.
So what happened was I started building a label in Berlin, and I did it with a partner of mine there. And now all the artists that I signed were Irish, but it's a huge amount of work to set up a label and to get it running and to like basically help develop all these artists. And I was finding like, wow, I'm really getting no time for myself. And I kind of just realized nobody's going to give me that time, so I'm going to have to take that time for myself. So I set aside 10 days where I said, I'm going to write and kind of produce a demo of one song a day for 10 days. And I did it, and it was a very intense period, but I did it. And Greatest Gift was one of the songs that came out of that sort of 9-10 days, along with a couple of others that are on my album. And they're quite rough, and what I also learned is that like although because I'm a producer, I can kind of hear the essence of a song before it's all polished and everything. But that's actually a skill that very few people have. So if you show someone a demo, most people are comparing that to totally finished songs they hear on the radio that have had about 10 other stages applied to them. And they're kind of going like, I think this is not good, but this particular person was a very close friend of mine, and someone whose opinion I really respect. But then you got to remember that not everybody has the vision, you know what I mean? Not everybody has that vision, or not everybody has the vision for particular things, especially if you're creating it.
Yeah, and it's so subjective. I mean, they could have been a kind of an R&B or a hip hop or a indie person, and this mightn't be floating their boat.
Yeah, I think what was what was maybe disappointing after that period was I was so impressed with the songs that came out. I was like, this is amazing. And so for him not to be amazed or even a bit like, yeah, I'm not sure, or not getting it, was kind of quite disappointing, you know? And I think, yeah, I think maybe I just needed to park them all then, because I actually ended up completing a bunch of them and being really, really happy with them. But you know, it can also be the space that other people are in and stuff like that. And you know, you don't know what's going on in other people's energies and what they're feeling and stuff, you know. So I've learned to be really, really careful with other people's feedback and pretty much not use it unless I really feel like it's right, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so integral to the creative journey, this whole realm of feedback, and when we ask for it, when we receive it, what are we looking for it, when are we ready for it, who's giving it, when are they giving it. But I suspect that it's probably a fire that most artists need to go through regardless, to face that, what might be seen as a rejection or a dismissal, and some part of you kind of almost dying. But perhaps the part of you that's dying is the part that needs affirmation, and it needs to die anyway.
Yeah, and like, you know, with that song, I suppose there was always something in me that brought that song back. And so it can be a bit discouraging for a while if you receive negative feedback. But if you continue to reconnect with what you believe in, what you feel about it, eventually that will just grow again. And you'll say, yeah, you know, I've even taken that feedback on board. I either take on some of it, or actually I don't, it doesn't make any sense to me, or it's illuminated this thing for me, you know? And now I feel like it has to go forward in this way or that way. I think that's when feedback can actually be useful. It's essentially just someone offering you their angle on it, you know? And so it could have something in it, but yeah, I think ultimately you have to just keep returning to whatever your motivation is, your intention is, your drive is, and that's really all that's important.
Yeah, it makes me wonder how many songs or books or movies never got made because somebody's mate told them they didn't like it. You know?
It's a good question.
Yeah,
and maybe they've saved us as well. You know,
this is the other thing. You know, this is the other thing, and yeah, you're absolutely bang on. I'm wondering about this idea of like this dream being like, there's probably different ways of interpreting or looking at it, that a dream can be some sort of angelic realm or like cosmic space that's downloading creative essence into you or onto you. But perhaps, you know, what all it was doing was revealing what was already inside you. It needed to come forward. It wasn't coming from beyond, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, inside and beyond, it could be all the same, you know. So yeah, like what was interesting about that was, I suppose, that I had gone to a place where you're slowly just becoming totally present and letting the day-to-day thought patterns just get slower and slower and eventually disappear. And then what's revealed is just this kind of calm, this presence, this more truthful perspective on reality. And so it was cool that it revealed itself then as maybe then one of my deeper desires, or one of the deeper things that I wanted to see manifest in the world, you know, come into the world. And yeah, and so I think that timing is no sort of surprise either, you know, that it didn't come during a very busy period where I was struggling with admin. It more came in a period of clarity, you know, and was amazing. And I had another moment just when I was actually recording the choir, because if you've ever worked with a gospel choir, like, it is amazing. Like, that was definitely like just a dream come true for me to be able to do that. I went to Windmill Lane recording studios, and I had the gospel choir there, and you know, I was able to work with them, and just even to be in a room here and 12 singers who are amazing, singing in unison, singing in harmony. Just the power that it has is amazing, you know.
Wow. This was the Morocco trip was a second sort of 10-day venture. Is this kind of rigor that you developed a long time ago, or how did that come about, where you had the self-awareness to carve out these spaces and to discipline yourself to take them or make them? Did it come out of, a harsh realization, or was it, what was behind that?
I think I had like I kind of went down one path first of all, which was not musical, and then I kind of had this realization I'm supposed to do music. Maybe only when I was 22, something like that, 21, 22, and so I was maybe 23 when I was doing music full time for the first time, and I decided to just jump straight in and just play 50 shows a year and play on the street and everything. And I made a living just about, I mean, you wouldn't even be talking minimum wage, but like for the first 4 or 5 years of doing music, I was earning about half minimum wage, but you just get on with it. Like you just get by on that. But that was probably my first time really living my dream, my first year. And at the end of the year, I was really burnt out, and I was not happy. And so that was a real shock to me, because I was thinking like, I could totally understand being unhappy when I'm going working in this tax office or something, like doing something that totally doesn't mean anything to me, commuting, getting up in the dark, going home in the dark, and spending your day on something that you don't care about. That made total sense to me why I wouldn't be happy. But when I was actually doing music and working on that full time in a foreign city and kind of living my dream in a way, it didn't make any sense to me. And someone mentioned to me at that time, that was back in 2013, that they were heading to this ashram in India for a month, and it was kind of like to do meditation and kind of yoga training. And I just thought, man, that seems like exactly what I need, because I'm just running from thing to thing, and something is not right, in the way that I'm living. And so I just booked the flight then when I got home after just hearing about it from that person. And it was like, it was my only 600 euros or whatever, to book the flight to India and back. And I went there, and I was there I was 30 days in an ashram, and I just spent another 2 weeks there after. But I was in a room. I got put into a room with an Italian guy who trained with these masters in Sri Lanka and Thailand and stuff. And it's usually 4 people in a room. In our room was just 3, and the third guy was basically never there. So it was really just me and him in the room all the time. And he was kind of sharing these techniques with me for understanding the mind and understanding the different personalities that pop up in different situations. And I kind of, for the first time, realized that, like, although I was, applying intellect and mental intelligence to situations, I was never aware my whole life. I was always running towards a certain situation, and again and again and again and again, and always driven by goals. I know goals are brilliant and everything, but like always searching for a goal means essentially never living in the moment that you're living in, always looking to a future moment which never arrives. And you could live out your whole life like that, never having experienced a single second. And I had definitely kind of, except for maybe some fleeting moments that I was barely aware of, I had just been tunnel visioning to achieve things again and again and again, only to discover kind of emptiness at the end of each one of those things. And this was just a massive wake up. And just to, I kind of spent most of the time after the first 2 weeks in that ashram, when I developed that sort of discipline of mind, just being aware in every moment and being like, wow, this is a totally different way to live. And what was funny was, in that first year, I was really like hustling, playing every little show, getting up even when I'm really tired, go out busking, get a opportunity to play some shitty little cafe gig for no money, and they passed the hat, and I was like, yeah, let's do it, and not that much happened as a result. And then after India, I was just in this other vibe of being like, I'm just going to be present and trust that the right thing is coming in every moment. And so I went back, and I was staying with my parents, and this was obviously their moment of peak worry, because not only had I left a safe job to go and do music, but now I was hanging out in India and had long hair and talking about just waiting for the right thing to emerge in every moment. So that was probably their peak worry. But a friend of mine who I'd studied music technology with, he had just broken up with his girlfriend, and he kind of just said, "Oh, here, can you come around? Like, I'm devastated." Like his girlfriend of 6 years had just broken up with him just as they were about to move over to Berlin together. And I was like, "Yeah, this is the thing that I'm supposed to do now. I'm supposed to go hang out with this friend of mine." So I just went to his house and I was just hanging out, and it was really nice. And he was like, "Can you come back tomorrow?" And I was like, "Yeah, perfect. I'm there." Came back, and he was like, I think one of us decided, like, should we make a track just to take your mind off this? And we started making a few songs. And then another friend of mine was like, "Do you want to help me present this radio show on community radio?" And I was like, "Yeah, no problem. I can help you there." And now in the back of my mind, I'm thinking nobody listens to this radio show at all, right? I'm just like doing this for my friend. But I took one of these demos that I'd made, and I played it on this radio show with this other friend. And the head of Universal Germany called us and was like, "I love that song. I want to sign you guys. That's incredible." And so it just showed me that just being present, a lot of things happen in a way more effortless way. Like I could have probably taken 100 shots on having some kind of breakthrough the year before, but just by hustling it, but it just didn't really happen. And then just by getting more into a flow, things happened. And that particular opportunity didn't end up working out, but it worked out in that lots of people started asking me to produce their music then after that. And that's how I got into producing other people, and I could much easier make a living. And yeah, and I think that was just a real wake up call of like, wow, like when you check into just being present, it's a much better life. It's a much better flow. You enjoy life a lot more. The things that are meant for you really do find you, and you tap into more the power of the universe rather than having to force everything yourself, which has kind of a limited power, I think.
Do you feel any, do you still feel any kind of tension around the goals or the drive? I mean, do you find that there are different parts of yourself that, for instance, you're releasing a new song, you've just released an album, you're due to release an EP, that there's part of you that feels the need to maybe get it out there and have a goal around getting airplay and getting a reach and so on. But the other part of you accepts the flow of that as well. Do you find, like, how do you balance that dance?
Yeah, I think it is a dance. It's like, because a friend of mine describes it kind of like a gear stick, that like ultimately we're in a human experience, so that has to be acknowledged. And if you try and deny it, you're probably also just preparing for a shock, because we do have a human experience, and goals and trying to do things in this world are part of what we have to do here, and so yeah, I definitely think it's a dance. I think the main thing is that you're in a good place when you're setting those goals, and those goals actually do mean something to you. And then you put your best into it, you put your best intention, but you also just accept whatever comes then, you know what I mean? And so you don't live in this, I try not to create illusion for myself, because this is ultimately, I think, where you can create pain for yourself, is like, is starting to really believe in a world that doesn't exist, which you can kind of easily do by just doggedly thinking about a goal and not really paying attention to what's happening around you. You know what I mean? So I think to have an intention is great, and I think to set out and do your best and just put your best into things is great. And it's great to just have a goal so that you kind of know the things that you're trying to achieve, begin with what you're trying to do in mind, but then just listen to the response that's come back. And I think you always have to be in a state of acceptance no matter what, because whatever your situation is, it already is. So there's no point not accepting it. Any change you're going to have to make will have to follow on. So you might as well accept it, get the clarity about it, and go from there. And it's also okay to be disappointed sometimes, and to use that as kind of like a little information and about taking the next step.
Have you had many moments of disappointment where you felt like truly saddened and gutted, and felt like, there were real times of reckoning where you had to question what path you were on?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like last year was actually like quite a disappointing year for me. In some ways, like I think I had made this album that I thought was incredible, and I'd spent years on it, and I put really a lot into it, and it was a combination, I suppose, of like I decided to release it during the first lockdown when it was all a bit crazy, and I had been looking forward for a long time to do this release tour, you know, and present it. And the release tour, of course, was all cancelled. And then the album release, just maybe at that time, it just didn't happen it just didn't resonate to anywhere near the extent that I was expecting.
What month was this, Enda?
It was in April. It was in April.
Okay, because it's you're ringing a lot of bells with me here. So,
Yeah.
because yeah, my first book, which took years, came out on March 26th, which is in and around the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were dealing with a world that was in fight or flight, or really like
Yeah.
mode, and had a limited attention span for anything else.
Yeah.
Survival. Interesting time to release, yeah.
Yeah. And I kind of just felt like I don't really believe in hanging on to things, and I was already making new music and stuff. So I decided to go ahead. And yeah, but yeah, that was really disappointing. And I think during towards the end of the year, you know, because obviously I've been working quite intensely with the other artists who I take care of, and it was actually a really great year for them. And I was really happy about that. And at the end of the year, when I was reflecting on my own project, I was just experiencing some disappointment about that, about, am I giving this enough time? Am I giving this enough energy and space? And am I responsible in some way for its lack of flight or flourishing, you know? And I think that was like a few difficult weeks. And ultimately then I had a kind of a hard couple of weeks realizing that I didn't want to maintain this sort of this other name anymore, which was Delush, which is a name that I created and put only my best into, and I love. But I also had the realization of, like, I'm not at all concerned with branding or creating a brand and maintaining a brand, or creating a mask and maintaining that mask and presenting myself in a certain way. Like, I am one human and a force of nature who does a lot of different things, and I want to own that and embody all those aspects in one. And so I suppose ideally, when I look back a few years ago, my intention with having Delush is that it already would have been a lot more successful maybe than it was to this point. But at the same time, the fact that it wasn't as successful as I imagined it was going to be, it did make it actually easier to say, like, I actually don't feel that other names serve me anymore, and I want to just go forward as one person who does all these different things, including my own music and my own art. It did make it kind of somewhat easier to let it, or less messy, let's say, to let it go. And but I did definitely experience that as like a death, and like as a very sad thing, because yeah, as I said, I'd only put my best into it. And so it had been really, really good to me, and I had been good to it. And yeah, so that was also sort of another disappointing moment. But after accepting every kind of deep disappointment, there's usually then a new part of the journey that unfolds, because you kind of let some sort of old things die, you know, and either then you're lighter, or either then you kind of like see what's now on the path, and what's ahead. And so I think periods of deep disappointment are often actually followed by periods of exciting kind of rebirth and new sort of opportunity and new excitement and new creative sort of happenings.
Yeah, it does strike me as a very classical kind of death and rebirth cycle, and in a way you like kind of consciously, I wouldn't say killed, but you certainly you dismantled or unwound or said goodbye to Delush in a kind way, in a sense.
Yeah.
But, so can you speak to me about the rebirth then?
Yeah, so the rebirth, I suppose, was just really owning that actually all of the music that I'd created under this name was also me, and actually the sort of the ideals or that intention that I'd put into Delush was actually now, and had been for a while, what I want to put into everything. You know, that what I'm creating is beautiful, and that it helps illuminate self-knowledge and inspire wonder, and it is a way of giving love to people. And you know, and also it's just fun. Yeah, and so actually it is, in a way it's a death, but in a way I'm just embodying it into myself. And the rebirth of it, I suppose, is just, it's just this very solid, real feeling of, oh, I made all those things, and I also am involved in working with these other great creators in a different role, and both of them give me joy, and I feel like very solid in that I can move forward and own all these different things and present them all as myself, and not have to worry about filtering, you know, oh, under Delush I only do my artist stuff, and when I'm a composer or when I'm songwriting for someone or producing someone or managing someone, I use this name, you know. And that never sat 100% right with me, and so that feels like a real weight off my shoulders, that I can actually just sort of own the fact that I'm actually a complex person doing complex different things, and it's not necessarily a neat brand, but also I don't care about that at all, you know. And so yeah, it feels really strong, and it feels way more unified, way more grounded, way more solid. And so now I'm creating and releasing from that place, and it feels really good.
And do you feel like it's there's more of a receptivity around that it's landing with greater ease than Deluxe was?
Yeah, definitely. Like, so I re-released my album, you know, really recently under my own name then, and I'm going to re-release all the Deluxe music again under my own name. And, you know, it was wild because, you know, on the re-release, it was chosen by RT1 Radio as the album of the week. And a lot of people who maybe didn't realize I was also the same person who's producing, writing, and working with all these other artists, as well as making this kind of electronic music in Berlin, are the same people. You know, I think a lot of people hadn't heard it, were hearing it for the first time now and being like, oh, wow, this is amazing. So yeah, that feels really good. And also it feels like, you know, people have so much happening in their sort of in their worlds, and then it's not that easy actually to put together that actually like this person is that person, and those two stories, one of which you might be aware of, are actually just part of one person's story. And so yeah, it feels like it's really a good thing, and it's reaching more people, it's resonating, and people are joining the dots as to all of my creative endeavors. And that's also kind of been cool, because I think people are maybe recognizing me more easy, and are sort of getting in touch and contacting me to do different things that are really cool and exciting. So yeah, like it's actually been really, really good. I'm really happy with how it's gone now so far.
Cool. How do you feel about the whole promotion, publicity, marketing wagon, and like the fact that there's no getting away from some realm of self-promotion?
It took me years and years to come to terms with, and yeah, it's probably one of the reasons why I'm maybe arriving relatively late to the game of presenting myself as an artist, you know. Because yeah, that it does feel very strange. It does feel very, very strange, and the kind of flighty energy of it all is not a nice one. It's a very busy energy. It's a very, like, you might finish a release day where you're mostly just posting online, and it's not you're not feeling great at the end. You're not feeling satisfied. You're feeling, your head is fried, and you're just sick about the computer. You don't feel super connected to your body. You know, it's a lot of just posting, writing to people, but in an email form. So yeah, it's really, it's still an area that it's like tough, and I've gotten easier about it. And it also maybe took me a few years to even just stand up and say, this is what I've released and I think it's great, you know. And even just saying that much felt to me quite unnatural, or a bit kind of egotistical. And then yeah, I'm kind of learning just to own that a bit more and say, no, I'm totally entitled to feel proud about what I've created, and to stand up for it, and give it a little bit of what it needs to get out there in the world. And if I stand behind it, it will reach a few more people who can benefit from it. So yeah, I'm slowly getting more comfortable with it. Many days I wish it didn't exist at all, and it wasn't something I had to do whatsoever. But other times, especially when it's in long form, like when it's just having a chat like this, and I had another chat at the weekend you know, these actually feel like real conversations. I've had a few interviews with magazines where they just email you 7 questions, and then you answer the questions, and they present it in their magazine like you guys had a chat. And I don't know who this person is at all, and I've never even seen their face. And so a lot of what you read in magazines is that kind of thing. You know what I mean? And I just find like that. I just much prefer this human connection, a real conversation, someone actually maybe doing a bit of research and being curious, and then I think find the results and what comes out of those conversations is a lot more valuable to the people listening, you know. So there's definitely aspects that I prefer, and hopefully sort of as I maybe gain in recognition, or my music gets bigger and whatnot, I'll be able to choose many more of those opportunities to have real conversations and do less of the things that I find a bit like just kind of shallow or something, you know, shallow and unsatisfying.
Mm. How are you finding the Irish music scene and industry versus Berlin? Obviously, you know, there's a long time, a well kind of trodden path from Ireland to Berlin in particular. It's probably no accident that you were running a label there, or have been. You know, Wallace Bird and Candice Gordon and so many other Irish artists have ended up in Berlin, and many reasons for that, like hotbed of creativity, but then rent and housing and things like that. So, but then I guess there's the scale issue as well, the size of Ireland versus Germany.
Yeah. So what's your question?
Well, yeah, my question is, how are you finding being full time back in Ireland now?
Mm.
And I mean, what's your sense of the Irish music scene as it exists? I mean, maybe we can't judge it in the current era because
Mm.
it doesn't exist in any way that we've ever known in the
Yeah.
absence of gigs. But I guess what's live on my mind in particular right now is, I guess, an element of frustration with the limitations of Irish radio in particular. But that's just me bringing my own stuff into the mix here.
Gotcha. So it's a complicated question because I think there's all sorts of people in the mix, you know, from the most soulful person to the person who's the most business minded and doesn't care as much. It's a huge spectrum, and most people I've met, I've had really, really good experiences with, and I'm happy to have sort of built kind of one by one, like kind of a team of those kind of soulful kind of people, which really helps me a lot. I think a lot of the criticisms with radio in Ireland are actually to do with radio in general.
Mm.
And I think radio in Germany, I think most people would like they wouldn't like as much as radio in Ireland. So as in, if you compare Irish radio with many other countries, you would actually end up saying Irish radio is pretty good.
Mm.
If you listen to radio in some other countries, you will find it unbelievably cheesy. And the other thing is that, like, I suppose apart from a couple of radio stations which are the kind of state-owned ones, I think people are just following, in a lot of cases, what people are watching on Spotify or listening to on Spotify. Spotify is definitely, I would say, like an earlier breaker of more artists these days. And so I think if you're getting a lot of listens on Spotify, it's pretty inevitable that you're going to get the radio play. You know, so I think we've just happened to have like certain artists get super big, they get super big then on the radio. And it kind of looks like they're really planted. But in general, I think those artists actually just got big by themselves on Spotify for whatever reason.
Mm.
And then radios follow suit because now the demand is there to hear those artists, and then they don't switch station to another station.
Mm.
So yeah, I've seen a lot about the Irish radio recently. I kind of sense that it's less sinister sometimes than people imagine.
Mm.
And I've had really good experience with some radio stations in particular, like, you know, RTU1, I think they really do great things for Irish music,
Yeah.
and to really listen to good quality Irish music and put that forward. I've had really good experience with the different guys on 2FM, and another show I love is John Barker's 98 FM, who's just Irish music for 2 hours every Sunday night, and he's a really important part of the Irish music scene, I think, you know, because people can go to him for probably their first radio plays. He listens to, I think, probably everything he receives.
Yeah.
Super kind and generous guy. So uh yeah, I actually think that, like, you know, sometimes when we look at a certain aspect in isolation, it can be easy to be like, that has serious problems, but actually it's probably just one reflection of the whole, you know. And actually we need to look at the whole, you know, and take the whole thing into account. So I mean, like, yeah, what, again, the question, what do you think about the music industry? I mean, like, there's definitely loads of people who are doing excellent work. I think there is a little tendency in Ireland to, like, get super hyped up about certain things in a way that I don't really think is a good thing, a helpful thing. Sometimes before people have even reached the stage where they're doing really quality things. And more like everybody seems to jump on a little train for a while of, like, this is amazing, you know what I mean? And I think maybe that came from the idea of that, like, if we can really hype this up, maybe it'll launch it into the rest of the world. But what I actually see from experience is that overhyping things that are not that great because they're hot right now actually kind of seems to reward hype over quality, and that kind of encourages people to seek hype over quality. And I don't think it leads to us performing that well internationally. And so if I would change anything about it, I would like to see more focus on people making quality breakthroughs as opposed to hype and excitement breakthroughs.
And how do you feel about the whole question of livelihood, and the fact that, you know, once upon a time the methodology was you'd play your gig, and whether it be a pub or a club or a venue, and you'd sell your tickets, and then you'd sell your CDs at the back and your merchandise and whatever. And there was some sort of a kind of a revenue model there. Whereas these days, obviously, we have Bandcamp, there's Bandcamp Friday, there's a kind of patronage, Patreon, there's, you know, eventually if you get a gazillion streams on Spotify, you start to get a check. But for the most part, there's big unanswered questions yet to unfold there, isn't there?
Yeah, I think if everybody who listens to this was to pick their top 100 artists, I'd say at least 50 of them are not earning minimum wage. You know, in terms of, and they could have the appearance of being very successful, because ultimately, just say, for example, if you're an artist who makes music for streaming, and let's say you have a pretty typical 50-50 deal with your label, well, that means that you need 1 million streams a month to make minimum wage, pretty much, or to make 2,000 euros a month. And that's with the idea that it's not costing you anything to make your music at all, which obviously it does. And it costs money to promote, and it costs money to hire musicians, and to have studio equipment, or to rent studios, and to, you know, keep a website and be insured and all that kind of stuff. So that's it. If you heard about someone who's getting 1 million streams a month, you would think that they were astoundingly successful. But they pretty much would just be, they would be nowhere near even the average industrial wage at that level. And that's kind of shocking, I think, because that's 1 million people listening to your work every month.
If there's 4 or 5 members,
if there's 4 people in that band,
yeah,
they're earning 500 quid a month each. And so then you see that, okay, that's why they have to go out and tour, which is also fine. And, you know, and I also keep in mind sometimes that 100 years ago or 150 years ago, there was no music industry, and the people playing music were also working on a farm, or like working in the home. And so, you know, it's always good to keep in mind that, like, what we're doing is so nice that so many people want to do it, that essentially that drives down the value at which anybody will do it for, and so it's very competitive, and it's so competitive because we will do it no matter what. And so I kind of keep a healthy sort of relaxation about it. It is a very high quality of life if you can even just about earn a living from it, because it's you're developing yourself, your connection with your body, you're expressing yourself, you're connecting with other people, you're playing music live, you're maybe traveling around a little bit, seeing a little bit of the world. I mean, that's kind of a phenomenal existence. So so while it is a real pressure to exist financially, apart from that, it's pretty cool. So I would like to see that everybody respects and contributes to the livelihood of artists like a little bit more, because people have no problem paying like 80 quid to go see a therapist, but some people balk at paying 15 quid to go see a concert, which might fulfill a similar function.
Yeah.
um
And in the absence of concerts these days, the fact that I, for instance, listened to your album over the weekend, but have yet to contribute anything in financial terms, I guess the onus there is on the fan. It's a bit of a
it is, yeah.
model like that. I don't really need the physical copy of your album. I don't need the digital files because I'm still going to end up on Spotify, but I do increasingly find myself going to Bandcamp, particularly if I've listened to an album several times. I feel like there's a bit of a moral kind of thing at play there.
Yeah, that's very nice and very conscious of you to think like that, because I mean, a label and an artist together will get about 0.4 cent from you playing a song. So that means, you listen to an album, and it could be you and a few friends listening to an album. That's 10 songs. You're contributing 4 cent. And that 4 cent gets split between the label and the artist and goes towards covering the thousands, or in the case of my album, a couple of tens of thousands spent on creating it. And so that's how big the gap is, So even if you guys listen, even if a load of people in a room listen to it 10 times, the full album 10 times, that's 40 cent. 20 cent for the artist, 20 cent for the label. And if that artist is 4 people, you're back to 5 cent each. It's like those kind of numbers, So that's why it has to really go to the millions. And then you're talking like millions of people, that's a bit wild, and so there is just these things in society, some of which seem to be really overpaid. Like if you just happen to be in banking, or if you happen to be in technology right now, you're probably earning a huge amount more for your contribution to pushing stuff forward than if you're in music.
Well, isn't this the thing, that the technologists in the music industry, in particular the likes of Spotify, are making money? Somebody is making money here.
Yeah. And the music industry is like pretty much at its biggest overall level ever, and so again, it's just pretty easy, I think, to squeeze the person who really wants to do it. And you see that happening in lots of industries, like either with like unpaid internships or work for exposure, which is something I heard a lot. And like sometimes when you're starting off as an artist, you might get offered to do a gig and you're like, yeah, there's going to be a lot of people there. It's going to be great for you to get your name out there. And then you go and you're like, man, this is a swanky place and this is a swanky event. And like, we're not being paid here. And it's like crazy. And it wouldn't even be that much to them. You know what I mean? And then at a certain point, you just go, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. And then actually, once you decide to not do it anymore, other things come along that are more respectful. And so I think it is probably a rite of passage to maybe even try out that, and maybe it's even good to do it, experience that a little bit, and then decide like, I don't like that.
Yeah, I also think there's an onus on the artist to educate in the general public sense that it's not anybody else's fault necessarily that an artist doesn't have a full-time PAYE wage, or that the person in that wage has never thought about how is Enda Gallery making his wage this week, So sometimes I think there's a kind of an education, like a polite, diplomatic, not non-preaching exercise whereby you say, well, actually, as it happens, I need to eat this week. So can you pay me, And I have found that, yeah, well, they'll come up with a couple of £100 or whatever, which wasn't there the day before, you know.
Yeah.
So I think like some degree, maybe that's getting more established as well, that you have the confidence
Yeah.
to self-advocate as well. Like, but I mean, it's an age-old value that like we're paid for our labor, no matter what it is, digging ditches or farms or whatever.
Mm.
And I noticed a tweet of yours there where you emphasized how your album you kind of alluded to the fact that you enjoy the idea that people might listen to it several times, you know. And I've been thinking about that about my wife's music as well, is that and how I consume music. Sometimes it's very superficial and it's very fickle. I'm like, it's a bit fast food, you know.
Yeah.
So as I come to kind of appreciate that about her music and others, I've been really making a conscious effort to rediscover music, and I've found that Spotify and digital music, something has been lost for me as a listener in the experience, and it probably ended with buying a physical CD every Friday for 20 years or whatever it was, and listening to that one CD like 50 times. Now, those days are kind of gone. We have to just accept that to a degree. But perhaps there's like a moment of awareness where we as listeners can rediscover music and the depths that the production and the musician have put into those songs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's the main offering, or the biggest gift I think that you can give to a musician who's really put a lot of care and time and craft into making an album, is to just give it your full attention. And because the artists that I work with, and I speak for myself as well, we put so much care into every tiny little second of the journey. And so there are things that we put on the surface level of the journey, which are maybe like, you know, you can perceive them as the melodies, you know, or you can perceive them as the lyrics. But then there are so many layers underneath of development and contrast, and, you know, the way sounds change and develop, the way orchestration changes and develop, the way tempos and rhythms change and develop, the way keys move in a song order from the start of an album to the end, the way that the concepts talked about at the start might be different from the concepts at the end, and how that will actually contribute to an overall journey. So we think about all that. And so if someone who's a listener gives that attention, it will reveal in a really pleasurable way, like a really, really good wine or like a really, really good meal, the things on the surface level, but also the things like at the lower levels. And that, like you said, like I was talking to my sister about that at Christmas time. She was telling me about that exact same thing. Like, she used to get an album and it'd start maybe like 1 or 2 or 3 songs. And I remember this too. And then you might start liking the song after that song you liked. And then you might maybe not like the initial songs as much. And then you start getting on to all the other ones. And then after a while you can listen, you really deeply enjoy the whole thing. And yeah. And so I think if an album is given full attentive listen, and just to even recognize, like, I'm listening to something that was created for me and people like me to listen to it, and I'm gonna just consciously listen to it, then I think the experience becomes like very meaningful and can reveal a huge amount more.
Yeah, I love the way Christy Moore always calls his fans listeners. He's really making a point there and saying like he appreciates the listening vibe, and his gigs are always like that anyway, that there's a little bit of like respect required, I guess.
Yeah.
Or demand. So Enda, we'll finish up, but before we do, I want to ask you about where you're living in Kilfenora, and particularly the landscape around you and County Clare in general, and how it may feed or influence any kind of creativity for you, particularly even just that contrast from having lived in Berlin and that kind of urban environment. How is Clare for you these days?
It's beautiful. It's an amazing place. I think the the biggest thing that's kind of gone into my work, I suppose, is that, you know, in the house where I'm living is quite remote. It's quite isolated. You know, it's actually still a 8 or 10 minute drive into Kilfenora, you know, and it's probably a 10 minute drive to Curfin the other way.
You're in the suburbs of Kilfenora.
In the suburbs of Kilfenora City, yeah. Just outside sort of the central business district.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
yeah, no, I look outside and it's just these beautiful green hills and green fields, and the hares come up to the house and run around, and like sometimes the cows listen in on what I'm doing, and you know, the birds in the morning and the birds in the evening. And yeah, just in terms of work, like I was creating for the last year an album with Strange Boy, who's from Limerick and an amazing rapper, and we kind of had a concept, which is about 2 years ago, which was to create an album using traditional Irish music with rapping. You know what I mean? So to kind of connect the older Irish culture in terms of music with what is one of the modern sort of cultural movers of today, which is hip hop, you know, globally. And so we kind of let that seed kind of like you know, take root. And then I just happened to be in Kilfenora during the first lockdown, the whole first lockdown, and I created like 30 or 40 pieces of trad music. You know, I had my flute down with me and my guitar, and then I got a banjo player to replay some of the guitar parts. And you know, then I worked with a few local musicians here, you know, to fill in, you know, adding extra guitar, adding a little bit of fiddle. Got Andreas on a few fiddle parts. And then went down to Malbay Studios for a bit of mixing and stuff. And so that'll come out soon. But that was one of those times where that really felt like the perfect place to compose this type of music. And it might have felt a little bit forced in Berlin, but it felt totally natural in Kilfenora, you know.
Nice.
Mm.
Nice. I love it. I'm looking forward to hearing that.
Yeah, I think the first one will be out very, very soon, if not. Yeah, and the album comes very soon as well.
Cool. Well, it certainly sounds like all your worlds are coming together now, and it's a real time of readiness or emergence.
Yeah, yeah, it feels like that kind of fruitful period after kind of many years plowing the fields and sowing the seeds.
Well, your father was a farmer, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess like almost everybody was a farmer, or a great many people were a farmer. But yeah, I have some cool pictures of him for Christmas. We got him this picture, which was in the Irish Farmers Journal in 1969, which is him operating, you know, the horses, which were drawn the
Wow.
kind of plows back then. As somebody stopped on the way and asked could he take a photo, and they put it in the Irish Farmers Journal. But it's just a really cool photo. You know, times have really changed, I suppose, in terms of technology and its place in the world. But, you know, when you look out at the fields, there's nothing really different.
Yeah. Well, long may the music continue, Enda. Absolute
Yeah.
pleasure talking to you. I wish you great success along the way.
Thanks, Rory. You too. It was lovely. It was lovely.
Thank you.